Introduction by Eric Hertzberg. After modernism. Postmodernist philosophy came about in the mid 20th century as a response to the ideas of the modernists like Hegel and Kant. Postmodernism posits that the truth is itself not entirely knowable and impartial, as what we consider history is itself written from whatever lens and bias the documenting historian saw the world through. Postmodernists believe that the modernist approach lacked nuance, as multiple perspectives, especially in the case of socially constructed systems, exist as such that multiple truths can themselves exist at the same time. Postmodernist thinking often takes into consideration the dominant and the counter narratives and tries to find a way of seeing the world in which we can analyze the conclusions we come to critically and in a way which more closely resembles reality. Skepticism, for example, is one of the ways postmodernist thinkers approach problems, thinking about the ways in which the social context something exists in shapes our perception. Postmodernist philosophers. Some of the leading postmodern philosophers who have had a significant impact on the theories include Michel Foucault, who has often argued against the label presented in what would become the baseline of most postmodernist thought in his works like Madness and Civilization; Jean Baudrillard, who posited the idea that our reality is itself shaped by our perception with his simulation theory; and Jacques Derrida, who is considered the father of deconstructivism.
Core principles of postmodernism. So the first one is skepticism. Skepticism is a postmodernism and advocates for a range of perspectives molded by context and society, thereby fundamentally challenging the idea of the total truth and dominant narratives. This critical position challenges established institutions and calls for the deconstruction of ideas and texts to expose the inconsistencies and meaning instability that exist inside them. Postmodernism asserts that knowledge is contextual rather than fixed, allowing for a variety of interpretations that represent various identities and experiences. This is achieved by embracing relativism. This mistrust of reality and representation is also evident in ideas like hyper reality, which cast in doubt the legitimacy of human experiences in a world where media dominates society. Postmodernism skepticism fosters a sophisticated, knowledgeable knowledge of culture and identity by encouraging a constant reevaluation of conventional wisdom. And some examples of that is deconstruction, cultural critique, and questioning about the absolute truth. Another key concept is relativism, which holds the social, historical, and cultural conditions rather than being universal. It determines knowledge, truth, and values. This viewpoint casts doubt on standard notions of an objective reality by arguing that our perceptions of the truth are shaped by society narratives and like personal experiences. Multiple interpretations can coexist in a postmodern framework, each with truth in its own context, resulting in a more inclusive understanding of meaning and identity. Relativism promotes the idea that no narrative is superior to another and calls for critical analysis of prevailing ideologies and power structures. An example of this could be media representation, as our perception of reality is shaped by which it creates a hyper-realistic environment where it is difficult to distinguish between reality and simulations. And then the last one I have is subjectivism, where it highlights the importance of individual interpretations and feelings in comprehending reality, implying that everyone has a valid point of view that varies greatly depending on their social, historical, and cultural backgrounds. This emphasis on subjectivity casts doubt on the idea of a single, flawless truth and emphasizes the significance of many viewpoints and voices informing our perception of the real world. An example of this could be a memoir narrative, as it demonstrates how one's own experiences and viewpoints influence on how they interpret the world.
Integrating postmodernism into classrooms can enhance critical thinking, foster creativity, and encourage diverse perspectives. Postmodernists challenge educators to understand diversity, inclusion, and multiple perspectives. Postmodernist curriculum challenges cultural politics that promote inequality based on class, gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, or nationalism. Students should be exposed to a wide variety of reading materials and challenged to think critically about issues related to cultural inequality. Incorporating diverse readings can help students reflect on various viewpoints. This should include texts from various ethnic groups to provide a more rounded understanding of events. You can also include cultural celebrations in your classroom that involve notable figures and traditions. Students can research and present these different aspects. Students can also use comparative studies, for example, using history and literature to compare folk tales from different cultures. You can also invite guest speakers into your classroom to share their diverse insights related to their culture or profession. Facilitating collaboration is also essential to postmodernism. Allowing students to work in diverse groups fosters discussion for students to hear and appreciate different perspectives. Peer teaching is another way for students to take ownership of their learning and respect diverse knowledge bases. Storytelling circles can also be a great way for students to hear cultural stories from their classmates to foster a better community within your classroom. You can also integrate technology and multimedia tools, which allows for personal expression and the blending of different media forms. They can also use technology to critically analyze media sources and discuss perspective and bias. Student centered learning allows students to pursue their own pathways and interests. This moves away from the one size fits all approach, and it also aligns with the emphasis on individual experiences. This also empowers students to question societal norms and address issues of power and privilege within the classroom or their lives. There are also alternative assessment methods that can take place in your classroom. This includes moving away from standardized testing and toward project based learning, portfolios, and formative assessment. This can provide a more holistic view of students' learning. Creating connection between subjects can also foster a more comprehensive understanding of topics. Connecting multiple subjects strengthens the idea that knowledge is interconnected.
Hello, my name is Abby Pierce, and I'm going to be presenting on critical analysis and how it relates to postmodernism in contemporary education. So, to start, I'm going to be talking about the postmodernism strengths when it comes to critical analysis. So, the first one I had was encourages students to question and think deeply about issues, which is always important, allows students to explore concepts such as fairness, rights, and responsibility, and promotes the idea that people have different viewpoints, which leads to students appreciating and respecting diversity. So, some of the ideas I had connecting to this was I feel like the first time I was exposed to different concepts relating to fairness and rights and responsibility, it got me thinking in a way that I hadn't in just regular gen ed classes. So I found it interesting to I found it important to add that one as a strength since I had some personal experience with that. Some other strengths when it comes to critical analysis would be from a young age, students are told to ask questions, which allows students to listen to each other and learn from each other. Students navigate complex social issues and get tools to analyze and understand individual aspects of diversity and equity. And philosophy encourages inclusivity by challenging narratives and highlighting opinions that are not heard. For the first one, I think asking questions from a young age to even currently in my classes, having other people ask things in a similar format that I would think about them versus just hearing the presentation read to you, it really gets you thinking in a different way. So I have learned from classmates many times, or by them asking questions, I've finally it clicked and I understand, and I was able to like analyze it in a different sense. So that one I liked and want to add in there. And then navigate complex social issues and get tools to analyze and understand individual aspects of diversity. So this is something that students may not be exposed to in their homes or just at home. So it's important that that's brought into the classroom so they get an idea of like the world around them and the people around them and how you're supposed to treat them, how what tools you need when it comes to these social issues and how to understand it. So that one's super important. And then by highlighting opinions that are not heard and really showing off diversity in your classroom so it's not just all white views. So I think that that's important that you highlight all kinds of nationalities and experiences and abilities. So then there's a multitude of opinions that are being heard. Some questions that I have relating to some of the strengths that I just talked about would be, how do you think diverse perspectives that students bring to our class can enrich our understanding of the material we study? And then another question would be, if you took a philosophy class, did you have the experience of thinking about concepts in a completely different way? Now, for some of the weaknesses when it comes to postmodernism and critical analysis specifically. So, philosophy has a lot of abstract ideas that can be complex for students to understand or relate to, which would make it challenging for there to be a connection to what they are learning about. Another weakness would be those who come from diverse linguistic or educational backgrounds may find the language slash jargon inaccessible since the texts are there's so many new words to be exposed to and very lengthy. Some of the final weaknesses I had would be, if these are not approached inclusively, it may marginalize voices slash perspectives that don't fit traditional philosophical frameworks. Another one I had was philosophy often promotes intellectual debates over emotional or lived experiences, which are crucial for addressing issues of equity and diversity. And emphasis on debate can overshadow the importance of a collaboration, which is major aspect of fostering. There have been many times in my classes where there is a debate and I'm really not focused on the collaboration piece and more so working against the classmates, which could be helpful in certain learning aspects, but not to be harped on too much. But overall, I think that for the weaknesses, they would be easy to edit to make them inclusive for when you are using them in your classroom. So there are definitely more strengths than not from what I have found when addressing the critical analysis. And then my final slide, I have two questions. Did you have trouble understanding philosophy due to the jargon slash complex language at any point? And then the last question would be, is there any part of philosophy you particularly relate to?
Here are some key points from postmodernism. Skepticism. Vital when discussing postmodernism. Due to those being skeptical, there was a diversity of views that was argued amongst people at this time. You could hear someone's theory or view and form different opinions or question those theories further. Relativism. The ability to process information and then decipher how that applies to your own life and or past experiences. Subjectivism. The idea that knowledge as well as meaning are shaped by human experience and connections we make with each other rather than seeing it as an absolute truth. Postmodernism challenges educators to consider multiple viewpoints and focus on inclusivity and diversity as it relates to their lessons. There is a variety of ways in which you can apply postmodernism to your future's classes, such as collaboration with peers, guest speakers, and student led lessons. Through critical analysis, students can think deeply about lessons, explore materials, and be exposed to multiple viewpoints and opinions. Some questions to think about. What are some ways you as a teacher can allow students to respectfully challenge each other's views? What are some ways you can allow space for yourself to learn from your students? Reflection. Postmodernism relates to contemporary education in a multitude of ways, as previously discussed. By exposing students to the different subcategories of postmodernism, we are giving them access to skills such as how to navigate social issues and the tools needed to do so, opportunities for individual experiences, and the chance to pursue their interests.